This episode, we're going to be doing the granddaddy of pretty much all horror movies for the most part, even though there are a few that came before it. But we're talking about Dracula from 1931, the Bela Lugosi classic.
Yeah, I mean, and this is like, I think, now, my Universal monsters are a little hazy, so I may be wrong with this, but I think this is like the first Universal monster movie, isn't it? Maybe outside of like those really early ones, like, well, no, I might be wrong, because there's Phantom of the Opera and Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I think was Universal. So those might have been before. But this is like one of the really, really early ones for sure.
So whether it's the first Universal one or not, I'm not sure, but I do know this isn't actually even the first vampire movie or even the first Dracula movie, really, when you look at some of the earlier movies.
Well, yeah, like Nosferatu was first, wasn't it?
Well, Nosferatu was first, and Nosferatu was actually based off of the Bram Stoker book. And the Nosferatu story is actually kind of an interesting story because Nosferatu came out, and then the Bram Stoker estate, I don't think he was alive at that point. Maybe he was alive when that came out. But they sued that film company and won. It was ordered that all copies of Nosferatu be destroyed. And most of them were, but there were a few that survived. I don't know if you've ever seen Nosferatu, but Nosferatu, that's a freaky-ass movie, dude.
Yeah, I don't think I saw the whole thing all the way through. I think it was on Netflix, and I tried that one, and there was the Dr. Caligari's Cabinet or whatever it was, that other like classic ancient horror movie that they did with the without sound. I think I watched both of those, or tried to, like within the same week. I didn't get through them, either one, unfortunately. But I saw, I've seen obviously like the clips of Nosferatu, and there's so many things about that guy who played Dracula and that, and apparently he was like a really creepy dude.
And the interesting thing about this movie, the 1931 movie, is this movie is actually not based off of the book at all. It's based off of the play that
I didn't know that.
Like written in 1924, I think. And it was actually the play that Bela Lugosi starred in.
Oh, okay.
So, but of course the the play is based off of the book, but it's one of these situations where there are certain things that were changed in the play to, back in 1920 whatever. I'm sure they changed quite a bit, just for theatrics,
Right.
And then the movie is based off of the play, and that's actually why, if you think about it when you're watching it, and if you don't know this, when you watched it earlier today, you might not have even have thought about it, but there are no transformations on screen at all. So when, Dracula turns into the bat, or the bat turns into Dracula,
right?
None of that stuff is done on screen at all. And then the same as in the play, the only special effects that are actually in the movie is fog, the lighting, and then the bats, which were rubber bats. Which I think might have even been the same rubber bats that was used in the play. I'm not sure, but
and he doesn't even have fangs in this, does he?
He does not. No, and if I remember right too, that the whole fang thing that's not something that came from the 1800s. That was something that was kind of added in film in like the 30s, or might even been like the 50s, the first vampire that had fangs.
Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah, it must have been the Hammer films then.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know I've heard before that, and I knew that the Dracula, that there was no fangs in it, but that was one of those things that when people think of vampires and Dracula and stuff, they always think that they had fangs, but they didn't actually have fangs until like,
the
mid-1900s.
The funny thing too is like Bela Lugosi as Dracula. This is like in my head the image I always think of when I think of Dracula, the character. I think of this, Bela Lugosi's depiction of him with the slick black hair, the little medallion necklace, the cape, white shirt underneath, button-down shirt underneath, and I mean, he's so iconic and out throughout this whole film. And then even the first time you see him, when he's on the Gothic staircase and the spider webs behind him and all that, it's just like that. Those scenes, those images are just like, yeah, that's Dracula. There's no question about it. But I also think of Dracula as having fangs, just from the time that this movie came out and then all the different copies and things that came after it, and different interpretations. Like, the fangs were definitely a big part of the depiction that I was used to. Here we have Dracula, and he's got, everything but the fangs. It was kind of weird to notice that. Yeah, it's like he never once did you see the fangs, or like, usually the fangs will grow or whatever. But yeah, it wasn't the case with this.
When you go back and you watch this movie now, it's black and white. When this first came out, there wasn't actually a score to it, which is another interesting fact about this movie.
Yeah, I noticed that.
But it still holds up. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a scary movie. I mean, it's still an effective movie.
Very effective. It has a lot of I think it's the background and everything, the Gothic castle. And, oh, by the way, I wanted to toss this at you real quick. First of all, one thing I noticed about this movie, I don't know that I've ever sat through an entire viewing of Dracula. Maybe I did when Sven Gulli had it on a couple years ago. Maybe I sat through it that time. I'm not sure. This time I actually sat through the whole thing. And the weirdest thing about it was all the pop culture stuff or the things about vampires that I saw just in this one film. It was like, oh yeah, that. I remember that in that movie or that movie. And it all came from this one film. But one thing I do want to say that I thought was interesting, there were, two things. I felt like had kind of almost like Star Wars ripped some of the Dracula lore off. One was the castle up on a hill, which is very reminiscent to the last year's Rogue One, where they have Darth Vader's castle up on a hill, which is something that they'd been talking about since Empire Strikes Back, and I thought that was kind of neat. And then two, how Dracula puts you in a trance was very much like kind of the Force. What was that? The Jedi mind trick.
Star Wars and John Carpenter every episode.
Yeah, John Carpenter did a movie called Vampires. But we'll get to that later.
Another interesting factoid about Dracula before we actually even get into the movie, again, goes back to Bela Lugosi. So Bela Lugosi was in the play. Universal's making this movie. Bela Lugosi wants to play Dracula, of course. He was, I don't know how close they were, but he was a friend, might not be the right word, maybe an acquaintance might be a better word, but he knew Bram Stoker's widow.
Really?
Universal was trying to buy the movie rights to the book, because as we just talked about not too long ago, Nosferatu didn't have the rights to that, and of course was sued by the Bram Stoker estate. So Universal's trying to get the rights to Dracula. The widow was like, hemming and hawing about it. Bela Lugosi talked the widow into selling the rights to Universal with the stipulation that he got the role of Dracula in the movie.
Wow. Well, that's pretty cool.
Because he wasn't a film star at all. He was a theater actor. As a lot of people may or may not know, he made Dracula, and then that kind of ultimately typecast him as, not only a horror guy, but kind of really a, Dracula.
And, that's one thing about that. As the Universal monster movies went on and on and on, he did play a few different roles. Like, he played Frankenstein's monster, and he also played Igor. When I think of Dracula, man, that it is Bela Lugosi, kind of like the whole, like Robert Englund is Freddy. Like that's how I see Bela Lugosi. Like that's Dracula. You know, you can't, and just like the original Frankenstein, Boris Karloff, yeah, like he was throughout the different Universal films, they like had different people play him, and it never seemed right. It always seemed like he was the guy who did it. So, and like I know, like this Dracula, like Bela Lugosi playing Dracula, like I can't picture anybody else doing it. It's like this is the guy. And even when he played Igor in a few of the like Frankenstein films, I just never thought it was a good casting. It always seemed kind of off because he's such a, I don't know, he's got that very sophisticated persona about him. So it was hard to see him do that and he played the monster too, Frankenstein's monster in a few scenes as well.
Some of the early Universal movies, they kind of did that with a lot of the characters, or at least in my mind anyway. So you had Boris Karloff as Frankenstein, you had Bela Lugosi as Dracula, Lon Chaney Jr.
Yeah.
as the Wolfman, and so on and so forth. Trying to think who played the, but a lot. I say a lot, but I guess it was three guys. It's still three guys.
Yeah, Lon Chaney Jr. was. Lon Chaney was Phantom from Phantom of the Opera, and then Lon Chaney Jr. was the Wolfman.
Right.
And I think somebody else played him in a few movies as well.
They did, yeah, because he was. I was trying to think because he was Dracula in Dracula, of course, but then he was only Dracula in one other.
Yeah, it was.
Universal
Believe it or
movie?
not, it was. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't return to the role until it was the Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein film, because he returned for that film as Dracula. But I mean, there were a few other times when Dracula showed up in those Universal films from then until now, or between that time, and it wasn't him. But so that was kind of interesting that like it took so long for him to come back to the role where that, like, in so many people's heads is like, yeah, he's Dracula. That's who he is. There is no other Dracula. This Dracula movie, and a few things I do want to say that like that came to my attention, because you and I always talk about, we're more like we were like around basically the golden age of horror, the 80s, 70s and 80s. That was kind of our our growing up, and that's like the slashers and all that. There was so much pulled from this movie into like I couldn't believe how much of it was it was like every little things in this movie reminded me of movies from the 80s. It's crazy. Like for one, let's start with Fright Night, which was like the one of the main vampire movies of the 80s. The whole the vampires, the scene where he where Van Helsing looks at the mirror and he sees that he can't see Dracula's reflection. I mean, that was this. I mean, Fright Night just totally pulled that from that, and I mean, completely. The whole idea where, Peter Vincent, he couldn't see the image of the vampire, and it was, and he had a little mirror in his pocket, and that's what it was, just like completely pulled from it. And another thing that I saw too that was pulled was like the whole, whoever that character at the beginning of the film that becomes Dracula's slave, or his he's like completely seduced by him or whatever. Well, he drinks that old wine, and that's what makes him like that. And that was like the Lost Boys. If you remember the Lost Boys, when Michael, all the vampire teenagers, they make him drink that old bottle of blood or whatever it was, and then he becomes the vampire at that point. So it was like Fright Night, Lost Boys, and then they were just pulling completely out of the old Dracula film. And again, I'm not familiar with the book or the original concept, so I'm sure that this was in there as well. But I thought it was really neat to see these things that. Oh, and also the shape shifting. One thing I never knew at all with this original Dracula, I knew he turned into a bat, but I didn't recall that he turned into a wolf. And in this movie, they're talking about obviously, like we talked about, they never show any of the shape shifting on screen, but they'll say like, oh, there's a wolf in the backyard, this big giant wolf. Where'd that come from? Well, that goes to like the Twilight series, and it's like the whole idea of the vampires shape-shifting into wolves, and Fright Night as well, because the one character in Fright Night shape-shifts into a wolf. And so I never even thought of that like as part of vampire lore. I thought that was like an original idea from Fright Night, but I was wrong. It was kind of cool to see all that stuff come from this movie.
When you listen to like interviews of, any of the directors, and not just horror movies really, but it kind of goes along the lines of rap music in a certain sense. You hear people in interviews and they're talking about like, oh, this movie, blah, 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 blah. And they'll even flat out say like, oh, well, I took these elements, or I got this idea from this movie, or I got this idea from that movie, or Alfred Hitchcock used to always do this. And so, I put that in here, or I did this, or I did that. It's almost like sampling, but on a movie level. Oh,
yeah, totally. And then like and another thing about this movie, which I didn't recall, and this goes back just to like this is way before our time with horror. I'm glad we visited it. But the three brides, that he has in the movie, I never realized that was in the original Dracula movie. But like and then I go back to like Monster Squad, and like the three brides are in that film. And like even the idea of Dracula having brides, that was incorporated into Fright Night. And so it was kind of cool to see all this stuff. Like, yeah, there's so much stuff pulled from this movie, it was like sampled, like you said. It was like just like taken from it. I mean, this lore is so thick and rich with how long this has been going on.
It's all these old movies too. Well, even some of the newer stuff now, when you're watching some of the movies that are coming out now, and you have that same thing going on where, well, to give a good example of that is, this is a lead into a future episode, but I was watching a movie earlier today. When you're familiar with new stuff and then you see stuff that's 30 years old, and you're like, oh, that's right there, that's cool, or that's where they got that from.
Yeah.
Or even like what you're saying with, you have these newer vampire movies, and they kind of, borrowed, or whatever you want to call it, from Dracula. It's pretty cool when you kind of see that stuff and you can make that connection. You're like, oh, that's where that came from, or that's how that got there. It's always even just as cool, or not cooler, when you see a movie that is, I guess it's kind of a little bit different, but when there's like a sequel down the road, and then you see a movie that was, made 30 years ago in the same franchise, and you're like, oh, they got it right, because that's exactly what they just said right there.
Yeah.
But on the other spectrum of that, too, is when you watch, and I'm not going to say that there was any of this necessarily in Dracula, but you do see it with other movies, which kind of goes along the lines with Monster Squad. Those guys were monster experts. Some of that was based off of movies, and some of that was based off of books or literature or whatever the case might be. But when you watch movies, newer movies or even older movies, and the lore is changed somehow, I don't know about you, but I always find myself like, that's not true, that's not right.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
And I don't remember if I had any of those moments in Dracula. I always have those moments, though, a lot when I'm watching newer vampire movies, when people are like, the thing that pisses me off is when you're watching any vampire movie and the phrase comes up, well, you got that idea because that's how vampires are in the movies. Well, that's because vampires aren't real, dude. They're always in the movies.
Right. One thing I did, maybe I didn't catch this, but tell me if you did. You have to invite the vampire in, but I guess that was in Salem's Lot as well. The only scene I remember like that was the scene where he's standing outside of the bedroom, and he's like kind of putting the nurse into a trance, and then she comes to the door and opens the door and lets him in. Was there any other scenes that I missed that like where that same kind of thing happened? Because I assume that like she was letting him in by like obviously opening the door.
I don't remember if there was anything specific in this one. To my defense, I do watch Svengoolie almost every week, and so there's different vampire characters on there every once in a while, and different Dracula characters and stuff. Because I mean that's what he plays in the Universal movies.
Oh yeah.
And there was something, I don't remember what movie it was though, but I don't think it was this one. I think it was like a later one where he was specifically like, "You have to invite me in." I'll tell you, the best scene with that goes to one of the early episodes that we've done on this show. Goes back to Let the Right One In. But when Ellie or Ely, she was to Oscar like, "You have to invite me in, you have to invite me in." And he was like, "Well, what happens if I don't?" And so then she walked in and like skin started bleeding and her eyes started bleeding and stuff.
Yeah, that was cool. That was really cool.
Greatest vampire movie ever made.
Now, are you a fan of the American version or the Swedish version?
Oh, I like the Swedish version far better than the American version. And if you are going to watch, and I think we talked about this during that episode too, but highly recommend Let the Right One In. The Let Me In one is okay as well, but Let the Right One In is a far superior film. And if you are going to watch it, it is a Swedish movie, get the version that has subtitles. Do not get the dubbed version.
I would agree with that, and I will also say, now I really liked the American version quite a bit. I kind of like how they structured it a little better, like the format of the film. So I'm kind of mixed. I don't know which one I like better ultimately. Probably the Swedish film. I think that one has a little bit more kick. But I think ultimately, out of all of the interpretations of that story, I go with the book, because the book really kind of digs deep into what happened and what's going on and all that. And the book was incredible. Like, I didn't think I'd like the book as much as I did, and I couldn't put that thing down. Yeah,
the book even gave a little bit of backstory.
Yeah.
And stuff, which you kind of didn't get that in either version of the movie, really. I mean, there was the one scene where Oscar's like peeking through the door and she's putting a dress on or whatever, and you kind of get a shot of like her crotch, and it's all scarred up, or groin area.
Right.
But they don't really explain it at all.
Yeah, I had no. I thought like I saw something I really should not have seen when I saw that.
You're like, oh no.
I was like, that's not right. It just didn't translate to me what it was until I read the book.
I wasn't watching John porn, I swear to God.
Yeah, I was like, that's not right. But that's a great. I think that's like the last really, really good vampire movie I've seen. I kind of liked Interview with a Vampire from the 90s, but even that was a little bit. That wasn't nowhere near, I think, is the caliber of Let the Right One In.
Okay, so let's go ahead and. I didn't have this planned at all, but we can go ahead. We could talk about that just for a second. So I read that book, Interview with a Vampire. I don't know, 3-4 months ago, something like that.
Oh, did you?
That's actually Anne Rice's first book, I think.
Was it really?
That book is like as old as we are. I mean, it's from the 70s, but it's really good. The book is great. And I remember being 16, 17, 18 years old, whenever that movie first came out.
Yeah. I saw it in the theater too.
And we actually, I must have been like at least 18, because we lived on Main Street in the town we were living in at the time. And there was a movie theater like 3 blocks from our house. And so we went down and saw it. And I think I saw it in the theater like 2 or 3 times, and I was just like blown away. But I'm like, oh, this is great. Because there was, at that time, there wasn't really any other real mainstream vampire movies. That was kind of the start of vampires coming back into popularity.
Yeah, it brought it back.
I read the book, and I'm like, yeah, the book is great. And I remember really liking the movie. I hadn't seen it in years. Went back and watched the movie. Man, that is a piece of crap.
Not a fan, huh?
No, the movie. You should, if you haven't seen it for a long time, you should go back and watch it, because I watched
it this past fall.
Really? And you still
Yeah,
liked
I
it?
did. I thought it was okay. I'm not like a crazy fan about over it. I would never go out and purchase it, and I don't need to watch it again. But I thought it was okay. Like I enjoyed it enough to like it kept my interest. But I mean, it didn't have the intensity of like let the right one in or anything like that, and it didn't have like the to be honest with you, my favorite vampire movies are Fright Night and Let the Right One In and The Lost Boys, all for different reasons. Those are those. I mean, I especially love. Well, The Lost Boys and Fright Night really just kind of those were like just classics to me. That to me is like just classic 80s vampire lore. But again, I'm going from the whole golden age of horror type thing.
Yeah, I just remember when I watched it this time and I was like, oh, this movie would be so much better if it was not Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, two of like the most overrated actors ever.
Oh, and too, that at the end of the movie, it's the Guns N' Roses song, the cover of the Rolling Stones, and Sympathy for the Devil.
Yep.
And it's kind of funny because I read it. I was reading, I think it was Slash's book a few years back, and he talks about like the end of Guns N' Roses was that as soon as they left the Use Your Illusion tour, they all knew that it was over, it was done, and that's why they kept the tour going as long as they could, because they knew that once they all went on their own way, the band was done. And sure enough, it was. He said that song, if you listen to that song, he's like, you can tell that we are totally not a band anymore. Like, we're completely separate, completely like in our own heads. It's all, it was like that song to Slash was like the end of Guns N' Roses. I always thought that was kind of an interesting bit of trivia.
So the song that was in, what was the other song that they did for a soundtrack? End of Days or whatever? That
was just...
was that just like Axl and the Boys?
Axl and the Boys, yeah. That was, I think, Buckethead or whoever he had in the band at the time. Yeah, there was no original other than Axl in that, I believe.
Yeah, because I remember, there's two distinct moments in the 90s that I had with Guns N' Roses that were awesome. And the first one was when the Spaghetti Incident came out.
I like that album, actually.
I actually do too, but I remember when it first came, and this was back, in the 90s, and so we've talked about before on here, this was before you're carrying a smartphone around and stuff.
Right.
And we were living out in the country at the time, and we didn't have cable or anything, so I wasn't like watching MTV on a regular basis or anything. And it was one of these things like I went to wherever I was getting music from, and here's this new Guns N' Roses thing. I'm like, whoa, what? No way! And I bought it. And it was like the other like really cool, because I was a huge Guns N' Roses fan back in the day. And still am. But when Interview with a Vampire came out, and that was like that was one of the big, if I remember right, that was like one of the marketing campaign strategies with it. They're like, oh, there's going to be a new Guns N' Roses song on the soundtrack.
Yeah, that was kind of the big deal at the time.
And so it was one of those things, you watch this whole movie, and so then you get sucked into the movie and forget about it, and then the credits start rolling, and you're like, that's Axl Rose. Oh, it's the Guns N' Roses song.
Was the song on did they put that on Spaghetti Incident too?
No, that was not on there, nope.
They didn't? Okay, that's right, because it's on the Greatest Hits. I've got the Greatest Hits compilation. It's on there. Yeah, it's a pretty good cover of the tune. I don't notice the separation of the band in it, That was a weird time for Guns N' Roses, that's for sure. Wow, we went from Dracula to Guns N' Roses. That's pretty cool. But
John Carpenter, what was the other one we just said?
Star Wars
and Guns N' Roses every episode.
We promise. But yeah, going back to Dracula.
You didn't realize that with this entire episode, we haven't really, we've talked about the movie, but we haven't talked about the movie at all.
Well, it's such a classic, iconic story. I think everybody knows about Dracula. And this version of it, the 1931 Bela Lugosi film, to me, it's like the epitome of this is who Dracula is. This is what it's about. If you want to see a Dracula film, start with this. And I do, I watched it, which kind of sucked. I watched it in the middle of the day, which was not the time to watch this movie. This is like make sure it's dark outside. You want to watch this at night because it's such a gothic film. I would give this movie a 2 thumbs up for sure. I think it was incredible.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it's a great movie.
it is. It really is well done. It's old but good, and yeah, it's dated, and yeah, you'll probably know all the mythology and all the vampire stuff just by everything you see throughout this movie. You'll see, oh, another thing, the big thing too, Sesame Street. They pulled a whole bunch of crap out of this movie too. If you grew up on Sesame Street, then yeah, you're gonna know a whole lot about Dracula.
Yeah.
All right, thumbs up all around. The horror heads give it a thumbs up. We definitely have to give it our stamp of approval. So Dracula 1931, Bela Lugosi, gotta go see it.